If it looked like that they weren't in the middle of something, I might pop my head in and say hello, and do some things like that, just so that they were seeing my face, seeing my smile, maybe ask them a question about something they're working on, praise them for something, like if I know that maybe they just hit a project out of the park, I could have said, hey, great job on that last project. Heard about it in the meeting that I was in, and I just wanted to congratulate you on being on good work on that, right? So I would take the time to do that. I would sit down with people. There were certain people who I met with quarterly. It might be a 15-minute or a half an hour conversation, but we had regular check-ins where I just kind of let them know what we were doing. They let me know what they were doing, and that develops the relationship over time. Okay. Now, again, that's if you're in a physical office, you can do some of those things. If you're not, if you're remote, then you have to figure out how you can do some of those things in a virtual way. And I'll talk a little bit about some of that here. I don't want to make this video too long, but I can talk a little bit about that. Now, when you are doing this, you need to remember two fundamental things about human beings. Okay, two fundamental things about human beings. Everyone wants to be seen for who they are, and they want to be heard. Everyone wants to be seen, and everyone wants to be heard. That is true regardless of culture, background, wherever in the world. Everyone wants to be seen and heard. Okay, so as you're developing these relationships with other people, you want to keep that in mind. You want to see other people as a human being, right? You want to see them first and foremost as a human being. If you see them as a means to the end, they're going to know that. They're going to know that you're manipulating them. They're going to push back on you. How do I know that? That's how I react. That's how people have reacted when I have gone in with that intention, right? And how do you react when someone comes to you only wanting something? You know that they're trying to manipulate or use you, and that doesn't feel good, right? So you need to start doing some things to see the other person for who they are, see them as a human being first and foremost. How do we do that? Okay, you might be asking, how do we do that? Well, you have to start seeing them as a human. I know, Jason, but you just said that, right? Okay. Well, yeah, because sometimes I just say the same thing over and over again, and you need to figure out what it means for you. But let me give you a couple of examples, okay? People dress the way they dress for a reason, okay? You can ask curiosity questions about that. If you're sitting here looking at me on the screen, right? First off, you're going to notice that I'm not in my home office studio. I'm on the road, right? And so if you were talking to me right now, you might say, oh, Jason, it looks like you're in a hotel room. Are you traveling? Are you on vacation? Where are you at? You can ask me questions like that. Those are things that are directed to me, right? Because obviously, if I'm in a hotel room somewhere in the world, there's a reason for that. Now, I may or may not want to share. That's up to me. But even just you asking the question shows me that you're seeing me as a human. You're trying to understand and get to know me better, right? Just by asking the question, even if I choose not to answer, or I give you an answer that, it shows you that I don't really want to talk about it, right? Like, well, I'm sorry, whatever. Okay. The way I dress, there is a reason why I dress the way I do. Okay. Why do you wear a hat? Why do I usually have on a black t-shirt, or I wear a t-shirt, right? There's a reason for that. And if you're actually interested in me as a human being, those are some things you could ask me about, right? If you've known me or followed me for a long time on social media, you'll know that there's some other things that are different about me and my physical appearance. I grew a beard a year or two ago. I never had a beard before that. I used to weigh a lot more than I do. I've shed a lot of weight, right? Those are all things, if you had been paying attention to me as a human being, those are things that you could ask me about. Now, again, you know that I'm a football fan if you followed me for a while. If you followed me for a while, you even know what my football team is, because we won the Super Bowl a few years ago and I was really excited about it. And I shared a lot online. Okay. So there's little clues that you can pick up in the body language, in what people are wearing, in what people are talking about. In the old days when you used to be able to see in someone's office, you could see the pictures or other things that they had out. That would give you a tip, right, into something about the other person, right? That you could ask about, or you could get to know them more, or at least come up with some questions that you could ask them. And so again, this has to come from the right place. You have to be really curious about getting to know the other person as a person. But when you ask simple questions, right? Because here's another thing that people don't realize. Do you know what the favorite topic of almost anyone is to talk about? Themselves. Do you know why? Because they want to be heard. They want to be heard, right? Everyone has opinions. You don't have to agree with them, but if you just listen to them, you are adding to that relationship. Okay. And so again, asking questions, trying to get to know the other person. Pretend like you're on a first date with somebody, right? And you can ask some of the same kinds of questions. I mean, obviously, you don't want to cross a line from a business perspective, but some of the same kinds of questions that you might ask when you're trying to get to know someone on a first date are some of the same kinds of things, right, that you may be doing in trying to learn about somebody else in your organization. And, you would ask different questions on the second or third or fourth date than you would on the first date, right? So again, you already probably kind of know how to do this. You just haven't really thought about it in this way. And that's why I'm sharing and reminding you about that today, okay? Because ultimately, as I said, people have to know that you see them as a human and you hear them. Right, which means that another thing where auditors tend to fall down is a lot of times they go in with a recommendation or a finding and they think that they're right. And they don't really listen to the other person's point of view. And there's always more than one side to the story. There's always more than one way to do any particular thing. And hearing the other person, learning how to negotiate and compromise is also a great skill for you to have as an auditor. Because again, we may propose something, and really, unless it's a clear-cut like compliance issue or legal issue that they're not dealing with, where the facts are completely spelled out, there is room for interpretation. There is room for doing things different. There is room for making exceptions and deviations even from policy, and everything is going to be okay, right? You don't have to win every battle if you win the war, right? And sometimes it's better to give in sometimes to know that later on they're probably going to give in to you a little bit, right? And so there's this give and take, just like there is in any relationship. So as I said, if you're getting pushback from management, most likely it's because you have not even done some of these simple things, right? Now, when should you be doing this? Well, obviously, if they're maybe a lower level manager and you've never met with them before and they're in the audit, you want to spend some time right at the beginning of the audit getting to know them a little bit better. Okay. Ideally, you would know the key people, or at least the people who are maybe 1 or 2 levels above whoever you're auditing, and you would have that regular, constant communication with them. So maybe the person that's the direct manager that you're auditing, you don't know personally, but you're on very good terms with their boss or their boss's boss, right? So that way, again, if anything comes up or goes down, you have that executive level covered. You've got good relationships there. You've got good working relationships with people at that point. They trust you. They like you. They know you, right? And as I said, the more that you do that, the people that I worked with, my peers, and that I worked with when I was the chief audit executive, those peers who I actually had a real relationship with, I didn't have pushback and issues. Yeah, we may have disagreed from time to time, but we always worked it out because both of us had invested into the relationship. We knew each other, we trusted each other. We realized that sometimes there's just a difference of opinion, and that's okay, right? But because of the relationship we had developed, we're able to work through the issue. If you don't have a relationship with people, then they throw up their hands, they walk away, and they push back on you, right? And again, that's not what we want to have happen, but it really takes you actually doing some of the work up front. Because here's the thing that I will tell you as well. Other people aren't going to reach out to you and do this probably. They're not going to because they don't want to talk to you because you're scary. Okay, you're the auditor. You're scary. And so it's going to have to come from you. Okay, it's going to have to come from you. And in fact, in reciprocity, that's how it works. You give now, right? Today for you, tomorrow for me, sort of a thing, right? That you have to be the first one to give. And once you give, eventually you will get, right? But you have to give with the right intention. You have to give without expecting to receive anything back. And I know this is an oxymoron, but it's the way the energy in the universe works. If you give with the right intention, with no expectation of receiving anything back, guess what happens? The other person feels obligated to do something for you anyway, even when you weren't expecting it. However, if you give with the intention of receiving something back, people will usually hold it back, right? Because that's just the way it tends to work a lot of times, right? So you have to do it with the right intention. You know, again, as you're doing these things to develop the relationships before you ever even go out there to audit, do it for the right reason. Do it because you're genuinely interested in seeing that other person as a human being, not because you want something from them in the future. Because people are smart and they'll know if you're trying to manipulate them or if you are just trying to, be curious and friendly. Okay. So I'm going to kind of wrap up this one today because, like I said, I don't want to make it too long. But find some ways, even in the virtual space, sending an email to somebody, having a 5 or 10 minute video call, right? Again, we think that meetings have to be in 30-hour increments. They don't. Even 5 minutes on a video call with someone will go a long ways, right? Other things, you can remember people's birthdays. Send them a little birthday note. You can, send them a thank you. Send them a link to an article that you just read and said, "Hey, I was thinking of you," and thought you might find this interesting, right? But again, you're doing these things without any expectation. You're sending the email, not expecting them to reply, not asking them for anything when you send it. You send it, and if they choose to respond, they do, right? So you don't put anything in there at the bottom. Literally, it can be as simple as this. Hey, I saw this article today on the Wall Street Journal, in the Wall Street Journal, and thought you would find it interesting. Link, send. That's it, right? If they choose to respond back and say, oh, Jason, thank you for sending it, I found that really helpful, that's on them. But if they don't respond, that's fine. And let's say later, the next month, it's their birthday. Hey, Jason, I think August is when your birthday is, right? Happy birthday. Hope you're doing something fun. Send. No expectation for them to respond back to you or do anything. You're just sending out that goodwill. Or, again, when you're asking questions, you're asking from a curiosity standpoint, right? Because you really want to know the answer. Gosh, I really want to know why Jason wears hats all the time, right? If you're really curious and you really want to know, I will tell you. Okay. But if you don't really want to know and you're just going through the motions, I'm going to give you some bullshit answer and I'm not going to really give you the real answer. Okay. Because I can sense when people are doing it with the right intention as well. Okay. So anyway, I hope that helps you. And like I said, that really is the underlying and core reason why most people get pushback in audits. And I know it may not be the answer that you want to hear, but it's the answer that I've been experiencing for the last 30 years in my career. And so if you really want to reduce the amount of pushback that management gives you, then work on the relationships up front before you're ever giving any findings, before you're ever giving any recommendations, before you're even going out and doing an audit, if you can help it. And if you're an audit leader, I think, as I said earlier in the video, this should be a regular part of your week. You should have dedicated time every single week, right, to go out and do some of these activities, because that's your job as a chief audit executive, is mainly in the relationship building. So with that, I am going to sign off for today, and I'll see you on the next video.